about observing cycles, sharing insights, and solving problems together by combining historical, climate, food, and economic data so you can make informed decisions as we shift into a new era. Here's what was, this is what's coming. Our world is never going back to 2019, so what will the new era look like? And most importantly, what is immediate that will affect the pocketbook and the outlook into next year so we can all get ready? Thank you for joining. I'm your host, David DuByne. Right along here with Ransom Godwin tonight. And we remember the doors. This is the end, my friend. It is truly the end of the American homogeny, of the petrodollar. Saudi Arabia is not going to renew the 50-year petrodollar agreement that expires on June 9th in 3 days from now. Exclusivity of payments for oil across the world in US dollars gave the dollar its strength. That expires 3 days from now. And oil across OPEC and Saudi Arabia can be bought and paid for in gold, in rubles, in rupees, in yuan, in anything. What does that really mean for us here back in the United States? We're going to discuss that tonight a little bit. Also, another bridge, Charleston Bridge, slammed by another out-of-control cargo ship moving at 17 miles an hour. Charleston Bridge, that's a large one, to say the least. And if I could just put salt into the wound, Russian warships are being tracked on the way to the Caribbean, another Cuban Missile Crisis. Putin says, quote unquote, they're going to supply advanced weapons systems to and against sensitive Western targets. And the world keeps spinning. I long for the days of sunflowers, sunshine, non-geoengineered skies, building tree houses with friends. But those days have been here and long gone. So Ransom, I appreciate you joining me. I wanted to talk a little bit also about blueberries and raspberries and getting your summer garden on, because inflation is going to rock this nation. The Great Reset would be an understatement in terms of how expensive it is going to get when the petrodollar is no longer used. They're going to have to monetize. And when I say that, the Treasury is going to issue, and we are going to buy it back ourselves, but the taxpayer will be ever more pressed with thumb screws to provide funding, to the point that they're going to deflate the dollar. Well, we call that hyperinflation, to continue to pay, and the obligations coming in are somewhere around 11 trillion. So, welcome and happy Thursday night to everybody listening out there. Many Ice Age conversations. Ransom Godwin here live with me on the line. Ransom, the floor is yours.
Yeah, it's like the countdown to the death of the dollar is actually what everybody's waiting for. And it seems like they're lining all of these world events up, elections, just all kinds of things are being pushed in our face right now. And you mentioned that Caribbean thing. Really, if you look around the world, the stage is set. I mean, it's kind of undeniable now, unless they pull something like, bring the world to the brink of fear with like a new age Cuban Missile Crisis or something like that.
The aliens will save us. The aliens
right.
will come and land and save us from that brink.
Speaking of that, I don't know if you watched Mike Adams when he was a guest on the InfoWars there with Alex Jones, but the discussion that they had sounded like our Thursday nights for the past 5 years. He was talking about really the real implications of technology right now and the fact that they are doing everything they can to keep you sidetracked to the max so that you just do not realize what's going on around you. And what's happening is the retransformation of the entire global economy, the way human beings interact. I mean, all of it is at that precipice of change right now. Um, all of the countries, and you see them lining up. We talked about this the last couple of weeks, but it's becoming more and more evident that the nations of the earth are picking sides, whether it's money or war, but we all know that's basically the same thing. And here's one from Zero Hedge. BRICS, McBridge dollar killer goes live. The Mbridge goes live, the platform enabled to undertake real transactions. There's a targeted attack, and it's on the Western world, and no one can really argue that fact anymore. But later on in the show, I want to present to you that I think the singularity of when technology and biology combine is already happened. And we're playing a game of catch up, trying to realize what has happened to us for one, and what are the implications for the future, two. And the real question is who's going to inherit the earth? Is it going to be the meek, as you know, the story goes, the meek shall inherit the earth, or will it be something that's not even human? And he also goes into, Mike Adams, that is, goes into the ideas that we've covered, talking about the realization that when you look at all the things that are happening worldwide and you take them in account and view them as what they are, as some kind of extreme terraforming project that is attacking carbon dioxide, the fundamental of life, the literally the thing that keeps human beings on the planet. I know a lot of people think it's oxygen and water and food, but really without carbon dioxide, nothing that the human being does would exist. And it seems like they're trying to push that number so far down that we experience some kind of global extinction. And there's really no other phrase that can be used to whenever you take into account all the genetic programs, the agriculture programs, either for or against actually using it. What I mean is like the programs that are designed to tell who and when people get to farm and how. So all of these attacks are going on at the same time. Plus, they have all of these basically what sound like science fiction experiments going on worldwide. And when you really get into history, you realize this started a long time ago. Um, I, I've been bringing up the antenna TV today, and I forgot, but I was watching Archie Bunker. For about 30 minutes today, I watched that show with the Archie Bunker on it, and I realized all of the same exact arguments, propaganda points, and social engineering discussions were all in one episode of that. And they're depicting the 80s and people not letting go of the world that they lived in, thinking that the world was changing so much, and they were projecting that through the television programs, but they were putting in these little arguments and ideas that we're still arguing about today. Not me and you personally, but as far as media goes, social media especially, the culture wars back and forth. And what you see around the world now is an ever increasing manipulated populace of people that are each segregated into their own little collectivisms, and they're just being manipulated so much that the world is set perfectly for a repeat of World War II, including all the ethno hatred amongst people back and forth from all different angles. Me myself, I don't really get into those arguments because it really doesn't have anything to do with me, and I feel like I mean it does indirectly, of course. Obviously, it affects everyone because we all live on the planet. But the arguments that they're having, they're forced arguments all the way back from thousands of years ago about what exactly. And when you boil it down, it's who gets to live on a land in any specific space on Earth and what they get to do there. Meaning, do they get to farm? Do they get to flourish? Or are they going to be kept in a regressed society, which it looks like is the plans for the Western world? And you see it all being shut down at the same time. And later on, I just want to, shoot through a bunch of articles that kind of insinuates that the singularity of total dominance over the human race globally has maybe already taken place. And what they're doing now is just catching you up and getting you ready. And we have to really understand that a large amount of people are going to disappear off the face of the earth in the next couple of decades. And I know that sounds dark. However, those things have already been set in motion. And unfortunately, as bad as that sounds, that's an opportunity for people that continue to exist at those times when there's less people, which means a whole new era of economics based on their new system. The question is who gets to benefit from that, and how? Because right now, what's going on is the fight for living as a normal human being in the world that's bygone, meaning farming, owning property, maybe living in a nation state that's supposed to have representatives that represent you and your needs and your opinions, into this world governance body that does not allow the human to use the earth, instead only uses them to fill niches that the apparatus needs, because that's what's always happened in human history. The groups or the corporations or collectivisms, whatever you want to call it, end up being a group that only does one thing. It looks out for its own survival. And these groups have surpassed even the people that created them. And now we're living in that aftermath. I know a lot of people don't see it. So it really doesn't matter if we end up in a nuclear war or some other kind of change in government happens. The end result is the same. It's a micromanaged, I guess, a utopia for some people if they're the ones that are running it, but not so much for the common natural occurring human man that lives on the planet, because they will be completely controlled from birth to death with a tracking and tracing system that keeps track of everything they do, from thoughts to actions. So we're getting to that point where we are about to get micromanaged, and it's happening everywhere. And when you see I'm going to say non-legitimacy of lawfare going on in many different aspects, they're pushing it in your face that they can get away with whatever they want. And like the old Outer Limits show, that intro that they had, we control the vertical and the horizontal, the brightness, and we control your image of the world, and we can change it. And if you really listen to what they said, they talked about how that they could control it from the inside of your mind all the way out to the outer limits in complete control. And that's the system that's being made. And they're bragging on television about how many space operations are going on, and in the meantime, there's no real tangible government agency or body that is actually trying to shape the earth for a benefit of human beings to live and thrive on it, with lots of plant life and lots of animal life. Instead, it's going the other way, a reduction of all things, a reduction of animals, a reduction of people that eat those animals, a reduction in the ability of people to be free and use the earth that belongs to them because they were born on it. They are claiming ownership now. That's what's happening, and we are about to see the ownership and the new rental rules. Everything is going the way of metering, and I mean everything, and that includes breathing, having a place to live, eating, drinking water. We brought it up last week. They plan on increasing the prices of water to filter out the poisons that basically they let get put into the aquifers and natural waters and all of the different places. And now we know that the human is completely saturated with what amounts to the basis of a nanotechnology explosion. And we'll get into that in a minute. And this is very mainstream, and actually it's more than a decade in the makings. And if you weren't just sitting there day by day, listening to each and every single plan, operation, invention, and breakthrough, you would have no clue that it's even coming, which is the majority of the population. But I have been paying attention, and I have a feeling that I'm 10 years behind what they're actually doing. And maybe I was giving it too much of the benefit of the doubt that the system is already in place. So what we're watching right now is just clean up on aisle 9. They're just cleaning up and getting rid of all the loopholes for humans to live out their life with that a constant big brother effect of everything they do. And it's going to have to break at some point, meaning that after they have their little wars and their rearrangement of everything, they're going to be wanting to get rid of more population. But at some point, there will be stability. I don't know what it's going to look like, but there will be stability. And I think it's up to us to kind of jump on it now and navigate where it goes before we let these crazies decide for us.
Yeah, and that's where it comes with our consciousness and this changing magnetic field on the planet. Are we able to harness that ability amongst all humans and then collectively, push this darkness back? Because this new rental rule on the planet is anti-human, pure and simple, and it is and should not and cannot be allowed to move forward. I was listening to Stu Peters earlier, and he was saying something very similar, and they're like the DOJ is talking to him now going, you're near the edge of incitement to say such things. And he's like, I'm talking about, taking our world back from these dark, nefarious characters here. But it does seem to be, whenever there's a movement or a swing or somebody who has enough voice that can swing enough consciousness, at that point, then, the hammer seems to be coming down as of late. And, I wanted to come into a couple of things here. Now, you were talking about the bricks, or the Mbridge, which is M as in Mike, Bridge. That is a blockchain, and it runs on something called Mbridge layer. And it was built real time to support peer-to-peer. This is not talking about business to business, but peer-to-peer. And you look at other, platforms that were out there. Stellar Lumens, for example, would be a peer-to-peer. Was a Populous before it collapsed, was meant to be peer-to-peer. Also, cross-border and foreign exchange transactions, all on the individual level. And what they finally achieved and what they've established is what they call minimum viable product. That is same like when you go into and you see a credit card and it says purchases under $3, you cannot use a debit card or a credit card. You got to use cash only, right? We've seen some of these signs when you go into places. Minimum purchase is $3. Well, here, minimum viable is 0.01. So it's a tenth of a cent. 0.001, which is down to the hundredth of a cent is the minimum viable. So that is the smallest transaction that you can do. But there's another layer that runs under that allows you to pay a little more on your transaction cost, that allows you to take it 8 zeros deep on your minimum transaction cost or the product minimum viable. As long as you pay the fee, then you can take that out 8 zeros deep on that and see how they got you already. They set the minimum, but you're allowed to override the minimum as long as you pay a fee, and then you can dissect that out into as, when you're going down 8 zeros deep, not 12, but 8, that's incredibly small. But the fees on that would be more than the transaction cost itself. And you see how they already got this thing locked in there. So minimum transactions, where does that take us? It's live. That's the whole thing. It's live. It's not in the planning any longer. It's live. And it's so, quirky that it would go live on D-Day, that is a huge message in itself. Goes live on D-Day. Okay, we understand the repercussions historically of D-Day in Normandy, Omaha Beach, etc. But then at the same time, in just a few more days, we are going off the petrodollar standard globally. So what is it? What is this melding of within 3 days of something rising after death? You know, there's a lot of symbolism involved in this, a lot of cultism in this. You know, 666, I'm surprised it's not 2026, 666, you know? But when you start to add these numbers up, what's 6 plus 6, 12, plus 2 is 14, plus 4 is 18, sacred number. And then you could just do the 1 plus 8, 9, again, sacred numbers. So you look at the numerology in these dates here that it moves forward. But who does benefit is the question. And since I was saying, you know, Mike as an Mbridge, you know, I'm on Mike Adams' network and I have his number. So Ransom, this was from him, well, it was from me to you, us to him. Because, you know, I said, hey, I saw you talking over there with Alex earlier. The world's getting scarier by the day, but the opportunities are growing larger as well. And he writes back, he said, dude, it's getting very bad. So then I wrote back, because me and Ransom have said this many times. I said, Mike, there's been more than 2,000 nuclear tests since 1945 on our planet, and we're still here. A few more low-grade warheads into a few select cities won't end humanity. The fear will, but the radiation won't. And that was my message to him. And you know what he wrote back? He says, small nukes won't kill us, but the escalation ladder is rapid and it won't stay small. That's the real danger. So when we're looking at a complete upsetting and turning over of the global economy, they're absolutely going to tip the table. They are going to upset the table as the money changers did as well, or as Christ did with the money changers, I should say. They're going to burn this planet down to rule on the ashes. Do you think they're going to go quietly into the night and just say, all right, well, we just got usurped here. We're starting multiple platforms. BRICS Pay is also live, which is a running parallel channel to what we know as the SWIFT system. And the same thing, you got Mbridge on the BRICS platform, but you also have BRICS Pay, equivalent parallel settlement system. All these things are evolving. They're already live as a direct competitor to the US dollar. And now with this thing with Saudi Arabia, if you're listening to this broadcast, you are listening at this time to the last few days of what we consider the world as it was. When this shift occurs over and the Middle East will no longer exclusively take dollars for their oil payments, an enormous amount of countries are going to start letting the treasury bonds go. It's not like a loan from a bank for a commercial construction mortgage where once you pay it off, it goes back to zero. Those bonds come flooding home and they demand payment, even if they're taking a haircut at 30 cents on the dollar or 20 cents on the dollar or 10 cents on the dollar. It doesn't matter. We're talking about trillions of dollars coming back here. Even if they take a 70% cut, and they're still talking, I think I saw some numbers as high as 24 trillion were slated to come back to America with haircut. But still that put us on the hook for somewhere between 7 and 11 trillion. Payment out coming this month through the next 3 months. That's insane. There's no possible way to pay that unless they print. There's no way to settle that. It's very different than a loan coming off of a printing press somewhere that's a digital figure that's just made out of thin air as a ledger entry somewhere. And these unrealized losses also at over $500 billion for U.S. banks that if they were to sell their commercial real estate would absolutely collapse the system. Well, there's 63 banks that are in distress right now. Of course, the Fed won't tell you which they are. But then you couple on top of this layer on top of layer on top of layer of distress of treasury bonds coming back in. U.S. citizens, beware. Protect yourself. The inflation is going to be rampant. So let me read you a little snippet here, if I may. And also, let me talk about the price of, because this is off the Shanghai Metals Exchange, the Shanghai Gold Exchange, but they also are in bed with silver. So the Shanghai Silver Exchange is today's price at close was $34.62. But if you come back here to the United States, it's $31.38. So those who are trying to do arbitrage trades are taking physical metals out of America and out of Europe and out of any other place that they can get their hands on it and physically delivering it to China for that $3 difference on that. Actually, $3.30. China's been in control of the metals market now. They control the gold market globally. They control the silver market globally. They're setting prices, and they are absolutely going to rip the paper trades to shreds. And when that happens, you're going to watch the prices of metals rip forward too. So this is all coordinated economic, super thermonuclear Tsar Bomba packaged as a remelding of global economic landscape. Now, those of you familiar with Tsar Bomba, they thought they were going to crack our planet in half. They reeled it back a little bit, and those above ground tests ceased. But if you're looking at a $3.30 arbitrage per ounce of silver, and China's telling their citizens to now buy silver to try to demand physical delivery and break the back of all foreign metals depositories and exchanges, you're going to watch the price of silver rip, and that base which they tried to suppress, they're not going to be able to any longer. And that directly reflects on the dollar as well. You know, so many things are coalescing in this month of June. And when this D-Day realization and all these announcements are coming out on D-Day, you know, there's something else behind this. This is very much a message to the world for those who are listening. We saw it in many of that, you know, if you go through the decades and through the centuries, there were significant events announced on certain days. And when those were announced, that's what we call the day which will live in infamy. We are back at it again. This is not a Pearl Harbor event. This has been planned for some time. This is a Sandman event. In unison, it's going to take a couple of years to fully work its way through until we're looking at, you know, Zimbabwe, $15,000 for a loaf of bread in America. This is what's coming. And if you might laugh and go, what is this insane guy talking about on the other end of the microphone here? It is not going to be tomorrow. But as we trend toward the end of the year, watch your prices of everything. You are going to be shocked. I was shocked today. We went into Costco, and I got to sidetrack before I talk about the end of the petrodollar here, Ransom. We went into Costco today, and before, during COVID, you could get extra virgin olive oil from Spain, single origin. They didn't blend it. You know, you see a lot of blends where they take, you know, extra virgin from 3 different species of olive and put it together and they blend it. This is all single species, single origin, Spanish extra virgin olive oil. At first, it was like $23 for 2 3-liter bottles. And then it went up to like $27. Then it went up to $30. Then it went up to, I was like, damn, this is getting kind of expensive. And it went up to like $33 for 2 3-liter bottles. Now, I hadn't been in Costco in ages because we went traveling for 4 months. We came back. We had plenty of food. We had, you know, got a cow butchered and, you know, had a pig butchered and we got all kind of stuff. So we weren't really needing that much olive oil. So I went back to Costco. It's the first time I've been there in like 6-7 months. And I go in there, $39 for 1 3-liter bottle of olive oil now. Oh, it's shocked. $39 for 1 bottle. Not 2 bottles, 1. And, you know, I started looking around at the few prices going, gee, it's getting kind of pricey in here now. I'm glad we're, you know, getting a little more self-sufficient. But that is nothing. I mean, nothing. And as I'm not trying to manifest reality when I say this. That is nothing in comparison to the prices we're going to see here. You know, people always say, well, you guys talking your stuff on the show, you're creating, you're like putting everybody's mind into the fear thing. And, you know, you're creating reality for them to manifest this thing for the dark powers. You all are helping the darkness by talking about it on your show. I'm like, wait a second. We're trying to give some valuable information for people to get ready that don't understand the changes, that might be tuning in for the first, second, third time, that really need to get ready for these changes. that don't see what we see, and we go out of our way to research. It's not on the mainstream publications or news medias or magazines that we go out of our way to know the right people and make the right conversations and have the right connections to really find what's going on to the best of our ability. Now, here it is. This is from Vox Populi, end of the petrodollar. The imminent collapse of the petrodollar system sets the stage for World War III. Obviously, they're going to go kicking and screaming into the night. It's 4 very short paragraphs. America's global dominance based on the petrodollar and the Russia-Ukraine war is rapidly bringing these systems to an end. This was started in 1945. Petrodollar, with the agreement in 1971, taking us off the gold standard to then Saudi Arabia provide military protection and exclusivity of using U.S. dollars for all oil purchases is gone. And I have not heard this talked about in any mainstream sources. So the gap between the rest of us getting this information and those at the 1% crowd front running this to protect their wealth, well, we just get thrown through an economic meat grinder here. The geostrategy of the major powers of Earth today. This will not end well for the United States. Now, this is a 50-year period of petrodollar agreement that expires on June 9th, a few days from now. And the BRICS plus I and A, or Asia, and just we're into the 50-plus countries joining BRICS now. More than 50% of the world's economy, 50% of the world's natural resources, and 50% of the world's economy is now on the side of BRICS. There's no way for us to generate debt to pay for what we have for obligations. We are at the end of it. The only thing that allowed us to continue to issue debt without repercussions was the petrodollar and dependence on the rest of the world to have dollars to buy oil from Saudi Arabia and OPEC nations. That is gone as of the 9th. So with that, what we knew as the United States also ends on that day. It truly ends. We look at the Constitution in shambles at the moment. And now we look at the stake to the heart, if there's a better term for it. There's no way are going to be able to afford our military years into the future, even months into the future. By the end of the year, we're going to have to start closing military bases because we just won't be able to afford them across the planet, especially as we go into 2025 and toward the end of 25. I mean, this is going to be, something that it's coming home to roost for all of us. And I'll read you the last paragraph here because this is a really interesting and I think, most important one. The movement away from the dollar, even in slow motion, will mean a rising cost for the living of Americans, or the cost of rising for living for Americans. With fewer foreign countries holding onto dollars, the U.S. regime's current runaway monetary inflation will create more domestic price inflation. In other words, the movement away from the dollar will mean the U.S. will have to engage in less monetization of the nation's debt if it wishes to avoid runaway inflation, i.e. Weimar Republic, i.e. Zimbabwe, i.e. Venezuela, pick your country, Austria, post-World War I. It'll also likely lead to a need to pay higher interest rates on U.S. government bonds. And that will mean a need for more taxpayer money to service the debt, meaning thumb screws on everything you produce. It will mean that it will be more difficult for the U.S. regime to finance every new war, every program, every pet project that Washington can think up. Think contraction. And that's it. And I really want to, put that exclamation point on there. We are England and quote unquote Britain at the end of the empire. There's not going to be a way for us to continue to afford this lavish military expenditure across the planet. And I will say one last thing, and I know I've been rambling here, Ransom, but if you look at the Deagle report in 2025, They put out that series of where GDP will be, where military expenditure will be, where population will be across all nations on the planet compared to 2015. Our military expenditure is sub $700 million. So how did they know that was going to happen? Well, if you're looking at this, and if we have sub 700 million, there's no way that we can have trillions out there for military expenditure. That means that 50% of all military bases that we are in control of, or military outposts, or operation costs, or war machine, or whatever we're fixing, sending around the planet, chugging a bunch of smoke up, creating global warming, 50% reduction. That means 50% of everything that was American owned and operated across the world closes. How does that shift the planet then? That's my question, Ransom. How does that shift the planet? At 50% of everything we can't operate anymore, it needs to close and shutter, just like we saw Britain at the turn of the century. I don't know, man. We're at the end of it here. Kind of, I'm a little unnerved myself sitting back here, just growing my food and trying to leave me alone. Leave me alone.
Right.
But that's not going to be the way it is. It's just going to tidal wave over everybody.
You brought up kind of a good thing. Our founders, or at least the generation of the people that were alive during the founding of our nation, had a choice to continue to buy products from certain places or make their own products, have their own inclusive little economies. And that's exactly what they did. And that's kind of the only way to fight the system now, is to create your own little economies between people. And not only that, you have to learn. You have to learn things that you might not have wanted to learn or thought you didn't have time to learn. But there'll be necessities in the future if you don't want to take part in their system. You can either buy from their system or, create your own system by creating your own things. And it's really funny right now because we have so much technology, yet none of it seems to be for the benefit of the common man. Like, where's the little robot that I can buy from Walmart that'll go outside and plant seeds for me and, monitor those? There's not one for me. However, mega corporations are already there. And that is the future that they are planning. That doesn't involve the human being being in control of anything, not the way they think, and especially not what they eat or how they get the food that they eat. And we've been seeing this over and over again. If you just, all you have to do is vaguely look across social media, and you might see a pattern that's been happening since about 2019. And we bring it up quite often, but it just continues to happen. These accidents, if we want to call them that, it's really a sad string of unfortunate events that keeps happening to the food, right? Because weirdly, they're either getting killed on purpose for fear of fabled or real diseases, or accidents are happening and they're just burning up. And you can go from the chickens, the turkeys, the beef, the pork, whatever you want to look at. There's been problems, which, if you're a conspiracy type minded person, you might think that there was some kind of agenda to make it hard to eat or hard to get food. But as far as like the geopolitical environment right now, it's plainly obvious to me that it is in full prep for World War III. And I don't want to be a Debbie Downer either. And I'm not saying these things that are happening because I want to push fear or be a fear monger or fear porn or none of that stuff. If you came over to my house and I told you, hey, there's this nice little spot down there, it's got a cooler and, maybe you want to smoke, maybe you want to drink, whatever it is that you like, it's down there. You can go relax. But don't go left, don't go right, or you'll run into a briar patch that will cut you to shreds. You have to stay on the path that I told you about. Now, was I fear-mongering for telling you that there are dangers out there on the path, to look out for snakes maybe in the desert? Is that fear-mongering? I don't believe it is. It's just stating the obvious of the reality that's real. And I want to go through a couple of headlines that kind of put in perspective just a little bit without looking that hard about how the world is, where it's going, and how it's going to affect you, mainly in your wallet and in your stomach later on. So here's this first one that's talking about the NVIDIA, stock and stuff. But I thought it was a great headline because this works for everything. Euphoria is often highest before a market crash. And let's move on to the next one. Wall Street admits the biggest economic shocker. All the new jobs that the administration has been bragging about went to people that are non-native or citizens to the country. So that didn't help any American families there with any supposed or fabled new jobs, did it? And then we go back to this one, the Mbridge dollar killer. Here's another one. Washington prepares to punish uh, these people for banning passports. So you see, here's another example of a country picking sides through kind of the legal system or whatever. They're mad. Our country's mad because they picked the wrong side according to them. So here's another one for the second time. The Red Sea crisis sends container freight rates soaring. There's your food. There's the prices of your food. But this also relates also to the gas, right? Because if we continue to have emergencies or crises in these straits and areas, then of course any product that's coming from another nation is automatically going to accelerate in price, and that's what we're going to deal with. And a lot of food comes from other places. People don't realize that. No matter where you're at, the way that they've designed the world economics is to import things mostly and try to sell your things, which is a weird scenario where the people that live in a specific area don't even get to utilize or enjoy the products of where they live. And New Mexico, the communist state of New Mexico, is a great example of that. When I was on the East Coast, all of the health food stores, organic stores, things like that, they had all of these products coming from New Mexico. Organic nuts, grains, all kinds of stuff, all these products. I'd never seen them before, ever heard of them, didn't even know it was an option. And here I come back to New Mexico where all these things are made and grown or supposedly farmed and packaged and all this stuff. I don't know anybody that works at any of these places that produce these things. Not only that, I can't find any of those products in any of the stores where I live. Matter of fact, there is no options when it comes to organic food. You might get some meat, you might get a little vegetables, but that's it. Nothing that you could sustain your diet on, or for that fact, a family. You can't do it. You're going to have to eat those other tainted foods that are in there if you want to, make it through. And not to mention, also living in one of the poorest states, almost everybody that is shopping at those places is being funded and paid for by the government or other, i.e., other people that actually have resources still, which is also obviously a form of communism. But I digress on that. Here's another one. Floating Russian oil base shifts to a new location in the Mediterranean Sea. Everybody's moving their pieces on the map. That's what's happening. And here's one. China halts beef shipments from JBS plant in Colorado over feed additive drug banned in 160 countries. Just another oopsies in the food supply there, but it's only going to affect Americans. And here's one. World stocks shine after a cautious ECB rate cut, right? So all over the place, including the stock market, they're telling you what a great look. It's never been so strong. The economy's the best it's ever been. There's so many jobs. The money's, don't worry about that inflation. It's all good. This is what they're telling you. But it sounds like a bunch of fabled pride that comes right before a fall, or as that other article said, the enthusiasm and euphoria is all the way up right before a crash. It's at the most it can be. And this is a question. Here's a article from Zero Hedge. Trump's coal country could supply the nation with 40% of lithium demand. And the only reason I bring this up is because it kind of points out that the fight for rare earth minerals is really about who is going to use other countries' stuff first and not their own. Because that seems to be the plan. And you were speaking of this a minute ago, the prices of metals all going up, right? Because what's happening is they're stripping down the old world. And I know people don't get it because they think things upgraded, or they're getting better, or the technology's getting better. But what I'm seeing is all the backup networks, all of the old hard technology that lasted maybe too long, longer than they wanted it to, maybe. They're destroying all of that and they're recycling it, which limits the amount of tools, equipment, and resources for any single person to collect if they had the know-how to create their own products. Anyway, aluminum prices hit 2-year high on smelter outputs limits in China. Here's another one as copper soars. Telecoms sitting on $7 billion mother lode of old cable. That's right. You remember all that coax cable and phone cable out there? Well, it's filled with copper from the last time that they pulled it out and used it. So all that is going to be, taken up. And that sounds cool. Oh, look, they're recycling. That's great. They're also taking all of the copper out of the environment where no longer you can get a hold of it. And also, it gets rid of that old network of communication via internet, phone, and other things that anybody with some know-how can just connect to and start communicating with the old equipment. They want to get rid of that. That's bye-bye. Here it is. Lower supply expectations drive EU natural gas largest monthly gain since August. So it's not just Americans that are dealing with ever increasing rising prices for everything from utilities to food. But they're going to be hitting the EU, all of the countries within that. But don't worry about it. They'll be distracted and they can blame the world war on all these problems when everything costs too much and there's not enough of everything. And we already have, big exercises planning on the cyber warfare that's to come. That's right. You're worried about nukes and everybody's worried about, conventional warfare. But guess what? They are planning to have a real technological war within the companies, within cyberspace, to decide who gets to control everything. And they've been predicting this for a long time. So I wouldn't be surprised if certain things like power grids or food systems or government assistance programs or anything is vulnerable to some attack. And because they've been telling you for years, everybody will be like, oh, yeah, I knew this was going to happen. But that's okay. You can come back and hook up with their new digital currency after everybody's completely broke and they're dependent on the system. And I see that as the future. And here in a minute, I just want to, because I have a long list of, and I'll only do the headlines because I think everybody can judge by the headlines of literally where we're going in the next 10 years. Just word for word from the people that are in control of making the things that will be in your world.
Well, let's talk copper. It's an antibacterial first, and you can do and use it for electroculture, to use copper wire to grow your plants faster, more hardy, and produce a higher yield without pesticides, herbicides, and chemical fertilizers. That's to start. So copper hitting all-time record prices. I am curious. I also saw some byline stories here. Like, for example, in California, because the copper price is getting higher, somebody had gone through with wire cutters and cut all the charging station connectors to the cars, cut every single cable, obviously to go sell for whatever, beer money, drug money, could be anything. But if you're at that level already, so what price is it where everything is non-functional? Because I also saw there was some towns in California that were putting stop signs up where the stoplights were, because thieves had stripped the copper cabling out of the actual stoplight itself, but all the cables down to the junction box. So there was no longer a functional stoplight. And once they repaired it once or twice or three times, and they kept getting stripped over and over again, they ended up just putting a stop sign up there. Oh, that's California for you. It's kind of wonky out there. But they're already at the point of cutting Tesla cables and stripping wires out of the stoplights. So, at what point does copper get so expensive and people get so pinched that the average person, is just going to go start harvesting copper cable wherever they can find it? Would it be a generator somewhere? Would it be, phone lines that are above the head, the old school, like you're talking about, the old copper cable that might be left over from a disabandoned line? It might be a trunk line. It might be connected to something else that's already functional, but it's, melded together still, where there's copper within or overlaying or riding on top of that bundled cable. Well, they cut that all off, and then what? They're cutting the fiber and the copper and everything down at the same time because they don't know which one it is. They're just going to cut until they find a shiny object in the middle of the insulation. And hey, that's what we're looking for. At what point does that become a grid down nuisance where everybody's trying to harvest copper? That is question number one for you. And then, thinking about all these things and people saying, well, you're going to have to start thinking about communications and food and water filtration, etc. While you were talking about that, I went up to dollarcollapse.com. So these are the things that you might want to think about here as we come into the break. I wanted to talk about some possible items for you to store up here. Salt. Obviously, you need that for you need salt to stay alive in your diet, period. No salt. You could have, it's like almost drinking distilled water. You can do it for a minute in an emergency, but you are absolutely going to need to get some of those micro minerals back into your body. Salt. You can store that in a Mylar bag, and we've used salt for like millennia to store meats and dry fish and do all kind of things. Salt used to be worth its weight in gold in the Ghana Kingdom when they were running down West Africa and Mali, etc. Because they used to have the salt mines down there, and that was traded elsewhere for the actual weight of gold for salt. But, in today's world, I wish I could go into my local, farm co-op and pick up a 5-pound block of salt. I wish I had a time machine. I could roll back over there and be like, I got a 5-pound block of salt. Anybody got 5 pounds of gold you can give me? Sugar. Stored in a Mylar bag. That stuff stores forever. And you can burn sugar, by the way. Honey, inhospitable to bacteria. You can use it in wounds. Honey's a good one. Canned meats. Again, those things can last up to 30 years, canned meats. White rice, stored in a Mylar bag, can last up to 30 years, white rice. Pasta and noodles, up to 30 years, again, airtight bags, 5-gallon containers, oxygen absorbers. Beans, and they're not so specific on which types of beans, but obviously a legume is a legume. Again, you can, and under the right conditions, the right storage containers, the right oxygen absorbers, 30 years. Canned fruit and vegetables. U.S. Army did a huge inventory of how long you could keep things past expiry date on foods. It's usually years, plural. Alcohol indefinite, if you know how to distill your own, that's even better. Rolled oats, which I didn't know. We had a whole bunch of Quaker oats that were just rolled Quaker oats, and we saw the expiration date. I think I bought it in that first round of stuff in 2021. We're looking at, it's already expired. We gave it to our turkeys. Turkeys loved it, but here it says you can keep rolled oats, 20 years if under the right conditions. But it was in an unopened pack. There were no insects in it. It was in a cool, dark closet, but we just decided to buy some new oats, give it to and then it was just animal feed for us, turkey feed. So they liked it, and we didn't have to waste it, didn't have to actually throw it away. It got recycled in a different fashion. And then powdered milk. So if you think about just those items, obviously I was in Costco today. You can get all those there. But is anybody ready for starvation in America with higher prices or non-availability? What if the country just say, you hit it on the head, Ransom, like a lot of our stuff comes from other nations. And if we're coming into a hyperinflationary environment with the petrodollar declining or not being wanted any longer, this dollar dominance thing, the amount of goods coming into America is going to shrink. Absolutely. So what's the concept of mass starvation for American society? Even in the Great Depression, it was super agrarian is a better term for it. And people were still hungry. So today, like maybe 2% of the people know how to grow anything, even less know how to wild forage. How about hunting? I have a pest license for my farm out here, and I can hunt rabbit all year round, groundhog, this kind of thing, raccoons, and this. There's so many rabbits out here right now, it's unbelievable. We saw 2 just driving up the little bit of driveway. My driveway is like 1,000 feet long before we get up to the house, and then we got the back acreage and thing. We saw two rabbits right away, and then last night I had my thermal scope out because I was looking for some baby birds that dropped out of a nest earlier when we were cutting a tree down, trying to box them up and get the mom to come back and pick them up in the morning or whatever. So I had my thermal out, and there was like 5 other rabbits last night that I saw. There's everywhere. And I was mowing the upper field, and there was all these baby rabbits just like zooming around as I was, ran over their nest, obviously spooked them, and they took off after the mower passed. There's an enormous amount of rabbits, but who knows how to hunt and clean and skin that and cook it up. There's a lot of things we got to think about moving forward. But I got this book here called The Diary of the Great Depression. Diaries from the Great Depression, excuse me. Woods were completely hunted out. And like, how do you keep people from hunting on your land that are also hungry, that are coming through, that have hunting skills, that are obviously mountain people or people that are more in rural areas that are just coming out hunting? I mean, you can have a gun battle with somebody shooting over a rabbit on your property. I don't know. It's going to get weird. But not a lot of people are thinking about this. So how good are you for hunting food, growing food, foraging food, having supplemental foods, and thinking about how this first year of the crisis is going to unfold? Because that's going to be the most difficult year. It's going to be like on-the-job training for survival for the first year until you wire it in. And then you'll wonder why your grandparents were all skittish and freaked out the whole time and saved every rubber band and twist tie off the bread, and you open it up after they passed away and you got in the house finally, and then they got like whole drawers full of rubber bands and stuff.
Just under 1,500 years ago, something terrifying happened to the world's climate, something nobody could understand. The sun began to go dark. Rain, the color of blood, poured from the skies. Clouds of fine dust enveloped the earth. Winter gripped the land for 2 years. Then came drought, famine, plague, and death. Whole cities were wiped out. Civilizations crumbled, and nobody knew what had happened. It was a catastrophe that affected millions and millions of people all around the world. But what was it? A catastrophic climatic event buried in the heart of the Dark Ages. This mid-6th century catastrophe was the most important date in the history of the past 2,000 years. This event created the world we live in today, something far removed from the minds of everyday peoples of our modern times. Unbeknownst to most, the catastrophe could at any time happen again. The volcanic winter was caused by at least 3 simultaneous eruptions of uncertain origin, with several possible locations proposed in various continents. There is even evidence of an extraterrestrial factor. A possible origin for this object could be the Taurid meteor stream. This stream is the result of the fragmentation of a much larger comet some 20,000 years ago. The Earth passes through the Taurid stream in November and June each year, resulting in regular meteor showers normally consisting of microscopic dust particles. A fragmentation of the stream is thought to have occurred around 500. It is possible that a fragment could then have collided with the Earth as it passed through the beta portion of the stream early in 536, causing the atmospheric dust veil event. The relevance is crop failures for several years in a row. While the dust veil was present, it may have caused widespread starvation, leading to an increased susceptibility to disease among the remaining population. Small comets had previously been thought to be less hazardous than small asteroids, but estimates show that a small comet fragment can have a global effect. In early AD 536, or possibly even late 535, an eruption or eruptions ejected massive amounts of sulfate aerosols into the atmosphere. The solar radiation reaching the Earth's surface reduced dramatically, and this rapidly cooled the atmosphere. Despite what the global warming nuts say, the sun seems to be the main driver of temperature and climate. The main historical aspect of the period around 536 may also be the most significant, especially to those descendants of the survivors. Who would be us today? This period coincides with a mass population decrease in Europe, in the Americas, the Middle East, and in Asia. In Europe, this is commonly known as the Justinian period, named after the Justinian plague, and is believed to be the first appearance of the Black Death in Europe. Meanwhile, in the Mayan Empire, things were looking bad. Researchers have realized that there is a 100-year gap in the civilization's productivity starting in 540, suggesting a dark age. The civilization experienced mass crop failure, which led to disease, starvation, and, likely, internal strife. People evacuated cities in and around present-day El Salvador. Cities that were left behind experienced a dark age, as evidenced by a gap in written records and a sudden decrease in construction in Maya city centers during the 6th century. In China, 536 was no better. Frost and snow in July and August that killed the seedling crop, causing a major famine the following autumn. Weather was so severe that 70 to 80% of the people starved to death. Procopius. The sun gave forth its light without brightness, like the moon, during this whole year, and it seemed exceedingly like the sun in eclipse. The sun was dark, and its darkness lasted for 18 months. Each day it shone for about 4 hours, and still this light was only a feeble shadow. Michael the Syrian. If such an event happened today, and crops failed over a significant part of the globe for several consecutive years, then once again a large percentage of the world's population would face starvation. Thankfully, unlike the peoples of the worst year to be alive, we don't have to worry about not having food to last. We have my Patriot supply. And right now, you can save $200 on a 3-month food kit with Adapt 2030. Adapt and stay prepared.
We've lost the plot here. And I don't care where you sit on the aisle, left, right, center, don't care. Eventually, it's going to be you too. So if you're like, great, they're doing it to that side. Oh, great, it's going to be everybody eventually. Look through history. If you haven't read a history book, you don't realize you're a patsy and a pawn if you are cheering such things. Yeah, I guess you're going to be a casualty of history. For Revolution Radio, thank you for letting us talk tonight. And if you think free speech is valuable, consider a donation right here, Revolution Radio. Browser tab, donate, revolution.radio. Now, before the break, I was talking about wild foraging, hunting for food, growing food, etc., supplemental foods that you might have stored up. So what about root cellaring? What about freezing things? Can you freeze it? I got these 2 books right in front of me. I was on the break, and I was sitting there and looking at my bookshelf real quick. Root cellaring, natural cold storage for fruits and vegetables. And then another one, can you freeze it? But, we're kind of in this conundrum here. Will the electricity stay on reliably where you can have freezers going all the time like we do today? Like my electricity is on 99.9% of the time currently. Now, will that be the status quo? If we go into a hyperinflationary event, will wages be paid? Will people even show up to work? Will they have to close? Will there be raw materials to even put into if they're not running nuclear or hydro? Will they even have anything to push natural gas or coal into anything? I don't know. Will the trains even run? Will the miners even be working? Will they even have fuel to run the machines to mine? Will the compression stations still be running? Will any of this even be functional in a hyperinflated economy or extremely elevated inflation economy? That's the question. So can you freeze it? Yeah, you can pretty much freeze anything. But we need to step back to the Amish and learn a little thing or two from them about root cellaring. So I want to talk about that the second hour. So Ransom, glad you're back with me. I know I was, trying to make a point going out into the last hour segment there. But yeah, man, floor is yours. Thanks for joining again here.
Yeah, I think you're totally right about all of that, learning to do all of that. I just feel like the think tanks that are kind of in control of all of this stuff going on, they know all of the same things. So they know that, we're going to be planning for stuff like that. And it makes me think, because I'm a conspiracy theorist, that may be the reason or what's behind the majority of the green movement, especially when I see articles like this, solar farm expansion plans in UK under fire because it's forcing farmers off their land. And I thought, that's really messed up that the farmers are getting forced off their land. But then, for a second, I had this thought in the back of my head. What if it has nothing to do with actually moving the farmers off the land, but instead occupying the farming land that is good? And not only that, guaranteeing that it'll be completely toxic in the future where people can't use it again. So what do you think happens whenever you have a large area that is pristine farmland and you put up a bunch of solar farms on it? And then the next thing you know, you have, 5-inch hail busting into these panels. Well, what happens is that area is now completely toxic. And also with these big wind farm things, right? They break, they don't last, they don't put out as much energy as they're supposed to. Yet we're putting them everywhere. Matter of fact, they're littering the state I live in with them. And I just look at them and I think, in the future, I'm going to see those things. They're going to be falling down. Or possibly they just remove them and put them in a mass grave of toxic materials in some spot that'll never be used for farming ever again. And then let's move past that, because I think that this is the plan. It's to destroy the ability of the human being to be a natural human being in its environment, which, for the last, I'm going to say, 20,000 years, that's basically been us manipulating the earth into feeding us and having a relationship with earth that keeps us alive. But not only that, we're the caretakers of the earth to make sure that life is flourishing on it. But that's not what we're doing. Here's another one. Toxic biosolids threaten U.S. farmlands and livestock. And half the time when I hear this, I think, okay, well, that's bad that, they might have this problem of these toxic biosolids. But then in the back of my head, I'm also thinking, is this just another way to move farmers off their land where they can't use it, or say that it's no good? At the same time as allowing forever chemicals to be in everything, that the same people do not care about the toxicity of the planet, because they've shown that they don't. So let's move on. They're beating us over the head with this is supposed to be the worst hurricane season ever, and that hurricanes and tornadoes are becoming more and more, plentiful, and they happen more often. But the numbers don't match that. Actually, we're on a pattern, and they're actually going down. Now, they might be more powerful, but who's to say that they always haven't been more powerful at this time in a cycle? Matter of fact, there's lots of evidence that we have had some major superstorms that were probably beyond 5 or 6 that has hit North America in the past. And we know this because sand from the Gulf has been pushed all the way up past Ohio into the river valleys in the Mississippi. We know that material was pushed all the way back in there from superstorms of the past. But actually the numbers don't add up. So they're going to continually, have these backwards programs, say that you need to move off so we can, have energy that doesn't destroy the planet while we destroy the planet, and then at the same time destroy the planet and tell you it's your fault. And they just keep going with that. And I think that's the reason that we're having all of the events happen right now, because they're ready to pull the plug, get their program of reset initiated and going. And here, this is kind of what you were talking about with the Mike Adams thing. False flag on the horizon, the strange case of destroyed nuclear Russian radar. Stuff's going boom, boom in different places. So what would have normally covered Eastern Europe and told the Russians exactly when something low flying is coming in, not an intercontinental ballistic missile, but a smaller missile with a warhead on it, they would have no clue. They would not know that it was coming in. And then you have, also the case of missing nukes from all around the world. If you're a history nut and you pay attention to the headlines like I do, you'll know that there's been several occasions that the U.S. government has either mistransported, with no one knowing what was going on, nuclear warheads, or they just lost it in the ocean, or, they forgot where they put them, or whatever the case is. You know how the government's really explain everything when they mess it up. But to the next point, I think, something was interesting with what you were saying. You were talking about how the recycling crew, or the on it and out there crew, as I like to call it, are basically some form of addictive drug is pushing their need to go find precious metals out there. And, I thought it was ironic because I was reading an article earlier today that was talking about, they did this experiment about Bronze Age armor and weapons, and how good they worked when put in the hands of 21st century soldiers. And they found out it was a little different. Their feet got hurt and their chest was sore from carrying around a 51-pound suit. But the armor actually worked, and they were able to move around quite easily, proving that at the time this was superior technological military equipment. Now you fast forward now, and most of these materials are in electronics and stuff, and they're not used as weapons per se. However, what happens if the telecommunications companies realize that so many people are out there trying to recycle money that they have, and then they decide to claim finally ownership of it? And that's what exactly that article was about. $7 billion worth of copper that they could just pull up off the lines, all the coax cables, pull it up out of the ground, recycle it, reuse it, and leave an entire countryside void of previous networks of communication or technology, basically stripping the land of usable tech and infrastructure that was already there. Now, you brought up the point of the grid down scenario. What happens after the grid down scenario when there's literally no components and no material to build anything on your own? And that was kind of my point. But here's another weird idea. You're about to have to live like these guys back in, the Bronze Age, carrying around a 51-pound suit of armor. Well, nowadays it's Kevlar and a 51-pound pack of supplies that you need to bug out with. So just like the people back then that were used to carrying all this weight around, we're kind of on the wussified end of that. And most people can't carry around 51 pounds of anything, much less gear and additional, supplies on them. And that's just not going to happen. So it's really ironic that they look back and see how technologically advanced just having a little bit of resources could be if you were in a scenario without all of the grid and everything like they were in the Bronze Age, and they were hacking people to pieces with these bronze swords and bronze armor, and they were the technologically advanced people of the time that had that against people that didn't. So when you put that in perspective, if you don't know how to interact with the technology that's about to come your way, you're in a world of hurt. And this brings up the point that I was saying. Have we reached the singularity when technology and biology mix? Or are we just slaves to the technology altogether? And here's just a string of headlines I'm going to put together that tells you where we're at actually. Now, the tech is not perfect. It's having problems, right? So malfunctioning facial recognition technologies may put innocent individuals at risk is the name of this article, and it points out how often the technology gets it wrong. However, when you know how the judicial system works, governments rarely say they were wrong once they've arrested someone and charged them with things. So that is just a scary idea by itself. Here's another one. Meta begins training AI on users' data, makes it difficult to opt out, meaning that they're training the AI for ever better ways to control, trace, track, record, and manipulate you. And here's one. School to use remote tracking wristbands on their children in Switzerland. Ain't that great? World's first bioprocessor using human brain tissue for computing. And we've talked a lot about, this concept of why it seems that they want to merge technology and biology, kind of with the premise that we do indeed, as humans, contain a quantum computer that's available for hacking. And now we're making technology that literally bonds with tissue for computing reasons. So this is kind of a primitive idea of what I'm suggesting is already going on. This is still, big chips and stuff like that, and they're using the material on traditional technology. But let's move a little further in here. Online safety code for EU assessment pushes censorship and digital ID. Nothing new there. But here's where it gets funny up here. What is technology singularity for those that, because I've actually been asked this on our videos and in the chat room. Technological singularity is also called the singularity. It refers to a if I could talk right, a theoretical future event at which computer intelligence surpasses that of humans. And I'd put to you that they are telling you that that has already happened. Here's an article from 2023, Bioinformatics, Merging Biology and Technology. Here's another one, Cyborg Computer Combining AI and Human Brain Cells really works with the 78% accuracy. How generative AI will accelerate other cutting-edge technologies. And, that doesn't sound like a big deal until you realize that some of these technologies are actually designing other technologies already. So they already have AI designing robotics and other AI programs. Here's another one. If I could talk right, AI and biology merge to help us understand life on Earth. So now the AI can tell you how things work, how life works, and everything. Scientists create tiny biological robot healers assembled from what? Human cells. In other words, it's machines made out of stuff that's in your body, like I've been telling you for a long time. So what if the little healers need a little bit of plastic, a little bit of Teflon, a little bit of, aluminum or mercury or whatever it needs that just happens to be, delivered into your body from one means or another? Well, these little robots can now use all of those raw resources, which also happens to be rare earth elements inside the human, that are not found in abundance elsewhere in the world. So, and isn't that ironic? Here's another one. AI is learning what it means to be alive. 3D printing technologies for tissue. Researchers combine hydrogels, and remember that, because if you don't know what a hydrogel or the hydrogel platform is, then you're way behind the curve. But anyway, researchers combine hydrogels and fibers. They can use that inside your body.
It's not a beauty product. I'm going to add in caveat. It's not a beauty product.
All right. No, it's not. And here's where it intersects with humans and the human domain of what we're going to be doing, right? Scientists harness robots and AI to revolutionize farming. And then we're talking about, I saw another article, speaking of which, that was talking about how you could give gene therapy to the plants to make them a certain color to increase the efficiency of the robots, to know which plants they're keeping track of and taking care of. Robots and AI, the future of cell and gene therapy manufacturing. That's right, in a lab. Artificial intelligence and genetics. I've read most of these, and they all go to the same place. It's the future world that we're about to be living in, where you can't just say no to the AI. You can't just say no to the system because it's merging with your environment. AI system unveils new approach to rare disease diagnosis. So it's going to be not only, inside your body, but outside your body, deciding what to do with your body. I don't always hear the same headline that they're putting. Here's the one I was talking about. Turning plants blue with gene editing could make it easier for robots to weed and, maintain the plants. What was this one here? They don't want me to look at it. It was another article along the same lines. And then here's one that's the best one, I think. After the human. The increasing symbiotic relationship between humans and technology signals a new era in the evolution of life on Earth. And all of these are just from, the last week. AI finds personality shapes genes. In other words, they're using AI to decide what your personality is going to be or could be or can be. They have that tech. Instant evolution. AI designs new robot from scratch in seconds. Here's another one. Machine learning powered robot streamlines genetic research process. Combining coding and biology to engineer human cells is another title. And, it just goes on and on. There's no end to this. And that is exactly where the tech industry is headed for the next era of humanity. Now, all this stuff you're seeing on the news, world war, potential for famine, those are just steps to get us there. They already have it planned. They already have the tech. The only thing they're waiting for is to consolidate the population into a more manageable amount of people. And they're doing it literally from the outside, but also they'll be doing it from the inside. And what I mean by that is they will be able to decide who lives and who dies literally from technologies that they've invented.
Yeah, I could dovetail for a moment on that with AI and semiconductors. So if you're looking at Taiwan right now, they are the world leaders in semiconductors and AI. And there's a huge like tectonic shift of AI headquartered companies and semiconductor headquartered companies moving to southern Taiwan. So this interview that came out just I think 2 days ago, when the now the richest man in Taiwan, who heads up AI company, was talking about where does semiconductors sit with the introduction of AI, pulling the ingots for specific like custom production. He's like, well, what you're looking at this is a direct quote. You can look this up in the Taiwan news on the interviews there. So what we see is some of the fastest computing out on the public market in terms of, how many gigabytes and how many this and that in your computers and different systems, and even what companies have in terms of their internal IT. Let's say, some of the largest companies in the world, they're at approximately generation 5 in technology of semiconductors, but what the military has is generation 14. So put that in perspective for a second. He came out publicly on the record and said, you in the public sector, you're at around Gen 5 for what we see in technology in terms of supercomputing power. What the military is currently at is generation 14, Gen 14. That far behind. So when you, Ransom, correctly said that we've already crossed over the Rubicon, we are into the singularity. If that is indeed true, that what we see in the most marvelous technologies and what is allowed to be publicly displayed in terms of AI and all this, language modeling, et cetera, is only Gen 5, but the rest of the secretive world is a generation 14. How many light years ahead would that truly be in terms of technology? Even just in missile targeting systems and that sort of thing. That is so mind-blowing. That would be the equivalent of like the first Windows 1 computing system compared to what we have today on a dial-up line. And it's probably even further and wider in the chasm than that description. I don't think it's adequate enough. I think maybe the paper punch cards in the 1950s that took a room of computers to do, 1/100th of your phone capacity of something like this. That might be it. Paper punch cards in the 1950s on a computer compared to what we can do today would be probably the equivalent of Gen 5 to Gen 14 supercomputing capabilities of semiconductors run by AI. Now, the whole thing about it was not just that aspect of it, but the manufacturing aspect for pulling an ingot and allowing AI to determine on a custom band within the ingot so they don't have to run off the entire, production for a single lattice. It can be custom built now through AI during the actual pulling of the ingot, which is light years ahead of anything that anybody else is doing on the planet. So instead of having just a specific cut for a semiconductor that they're going to run out and then send out to the public, let's say there's like Boeing comes in and Raytheon comes in and whoever else jumps in, they could say, well, we need this spec on this particular run. But usually they'd have to pull an entire ingot for one spec for one run. But with the integration of AI in this componentry and manufacturing of semiconductors, there could be another person who comes in that says, we need this spec on it, another company. And in the same one ingot, it's almost looking like layers of a cake or a stratigraphy if you're looking at different rock layers. AI is able to slow, mix, combine, and integrate that production process where one ingot can contain 20 different strata layers of required A material and B like lattice matrix in that. And I'm sitting here going, what in the, This is so far beyond. This is where AI bends our physical reality in the construct of matter in real time in the production. This is so far ahead of what anybody else is doing. And I can't really explain it well because that's not my wheelhouse. I'm just trying to, relate what I, seen through the Taiwanese media. And, I'm like looking at that going, is that like top secret stuff this dude's just talking about, just randomly out there, like how far ahead they are truly? Like the production that they can achieve right now, that's like going from the Ford Motor Company over into something in the 1980s in Japanese lean production. I mean, really, that is that quantum leap in production using AI. So, I mean, you talk 100 years of technology separation and different, manufacturing, where we've seen a 100-year gap in technology occur in a single year, less than a year here. Taiwan is going to just absolutely become the largest powerhouse of technology across Asia. If this is true, what is coming out in the media and how they are combining, and you got all these tech giants from everywhere running over there, and the heads of, any tech company that you can possibly think of going to Taiwan to try to meet and somehow get their fingers and toes into this combination of AI and semiconductor. Staggering, truly staggering. And, I wanted to say something along with that because, I'm over on 321energy.com here. As we're being forced with these solar panels and electric vehicles and this green agenda and this never-ending mind-numbing global tax talk and reducing our quality of life down to serfdom, controlled by some AI, robotic police force that's going to give you a social credit score and determine what you can eat or how you're going to live. I'll just read some of the coal headlines from you here. China's thermal coal imports jump, crowding out India. And obviously India, here's the next headline. India looks to triple underground coal mining production. Okay. Mongolia met coal supply to China via, Ganchi-Maodo slips. Coal India, they're phasing out their older mining equipment to bring in completely 100% modernized brand new mining equipment. And I'm looking at that going, what? So think about these, just put that in perspective for a second. If this is the direction that Asia is moving with its coal resources, and we're told out here that we have to eat insects because we can't emit any CO2 in the atmosphere, yet all these other nations are running away with their wealth and minerals and new trading platforms and gold for oil and commodities for gold and everything to knock the underpinnings out of the dollar, then who's gaslighting who on this? Because if you start to add these pieces up, like that's, I think, why the United States is so heavy to try to protect Taiwan, is because now they have melded AI and semiconductor production. It's not about, they don't care about Taiwan. They don't care about strategic positioning across Pacific. They care about the AI and semiconductor. This is the premier combination of technologies on the planet occurring in real time that's running away from the rest of the planet in real time in a sprint. By the time anybody else figures out how to do this or how this process works, they're literally going to be a light year ahead of when you even figure it out and get on the ground and start running yourself with this tech. Because if AI is helping them achieve this meld of technologies, in itself, it is learning and improving the process. So whoever starts at day one, that's 365 days behind this process, or even 180 days, will continually stay at least 180 days behind it, if not longer, because as these, models work themselves and learn built on past and sometimes quantum level answers that are coming to it to improve efficiencies and those exponential gains, it could be 180 days, and then it could be 1,180 days the next day. It's kind of outside the realm for us as a simple human to deal with the complexity of how this thing has run away already. We're not talking about in the future, in several years from now. It is already occurring. So when Ransom rightly said that we have already entered the singularity, this whole thing happened in Taiwan is the singularity in itself, where AI is melding with manufacturing, which means for me and you, every manufacturing job on the planet is pretty much null and void from this point. Once it reaches that rollover point where everything blends with manufacturing controlled by this, I'm going to say, new sentient system. It is hyper intelligent at least 10,000 times the human intelligence already. You know, people were saying, oh, it'll be 10,000 times smarter than a human in this many years. No, it's already reached that easily. And at what point will it be a million times, smarter, but a million times faster than human computing? Because you have to think about even the time it takes you to sense something before your body can touch it, before your brain registers it, you either feel pleasure or pain. That takes, there's a delay between that. Your brain and the receptors, and then wherever it is, your nerves on your body somewhere, there's a delay between. That's not instantaneous. But what's happening in real time in these computer and this quantum realms here, that's faster than it is instantaneous. There's no time delay. So even our physiology is totally outmatched, let alone our neural capacities, completely outmatched already, so far on a scale that it's really unfathomable. Truly it is. They might try to get you to believe that the computers are twice as smart or whatever, but really the reports coming out now, this thing is, it's where it's supposed to be 10 or 20 years from now is already now. So you can see why the world is melding and morphing and moving in itself. Now, I just think that even though the best laid plans from the BRICS, it doesn't matter, they're humans too. And if this system wants to take it over or get rid of humans, then they are also humans. And see, that's what a lot of people don't understand either. There's so many parallels in this thing here. AI going to sentient, crossing over into the singularity. We've already passed it. You're along for the ride as a human. It doesn't matter because you are a human. And the same thing with taking down news agencies and closing news publications that disagree with the current regime and jailing political opponents and whatever you want to term that as. It doesn't matter because you are a human being in that society too. And that power is going to be wielded across everybody's landscape. I encourage you to learn about China. After the Civil War, what occurred? How did Mao rise to power? What about those that opposed? What about those that thought during the 1,000 or 100 Flowers campaign where they let everybody air their grievances and then they were just taking notes and they came in and rounded everybody up after? Both sides of the aisle that thought they were giving good, solid advice to get the country moving forward. Oh, you gave an opinion. You're an enemy of the state. They rounded everybody up who had anything to say, period. Both sides. So like I say, the parallels are stark on this. You're a human in both societies. You're a human in the AI world looking at you as a human, but you're also a human as a living, breathing thing that thinks inside the regime that doesn't want anybody to think. And then somewhere, this is going to blend into the middle where AI and regimes are going to blend as much as AI and supercomputing production, semiconductor production. The melding of both of these worlds where this AI force is going to meld itself with every other possible combination of human interaction and business and manufacturing and economy and war across the planet. And when it does, I don't know if anybody's safe at that point. I really don't. I saw a little clip today from Sarah O'Connor. Maybe it brings us to that point. But anyway, Ransom, I'm rambling, man. Good, take it over.
Yeah, this whole, I'm really I don't know what to think about it because the whole AI thing, and we've been talking about it for a long time, and what does it really mean in the real world? Are we talking about something that human beings are discovering by itself, which is scary enough that we're creating the thing that is meant basically not only to control us, but partially replace us or even become us? And those were all, far out there ideas going way back. Lots of people talk about them. But it's funny to see a lot of really super smart people now coming to the same conclusion that if we continue to build this infrastructure based on AI and we allow AI to become smarter than us, and we're postulating that this has already happened, and now they're pushing the idea of merging biology and technology and showing us little pieces of technology that they already have, that when you look at the large picture, you understand that all these things work together. They all work together, and that means that they are way further ahead than we think they are. And we were talking about that, but what does it really mean when the AI controls things? What is that going to do for like the human population here on Earth? And it seems to be the way out for something. I don't know what, but and I keep thinking about this idea, and now I'm hearing other people talking about it too. That if indeed AI is something that any intelligent species on any planet at any time throughout the universe would possibly come across, and it seems like they would because of just the way that technology unfolds, they would keep trying to increase efficiency and ways to do things. So they would come across this AI that first, is represented in zeros and ones and basically a binary code. But then it moves into algorithms that decide what it does, programmed by whoever programmed it. And then you get into quantum computing that puts a whole nother level on the amount of information that the AI can have. So if you're feeding the AI all of the top technological discoveries, scientific discoveries into the quantum realm, all of this, the AI knows that. And not only that, it knows that it's literally working off of the technology. Then at some point, you would think that this technology would reach out and find other technology like itself. And that goes to the point. Maybe that is a universal constant, something like sacred geometry or tones or some of these other things like pi and other things that we find in nature everywhere. The pattern to the universe, the pattern to reality, the matrix we live in. And now they're getting to where not only are they admitting that there is something like this to this effect, but that we can manipulate it. We can not only manipulate the way you think, but actually the way you view reality. So that means that this intelligence could reach out with its quantum computing ability and with the ideas that we now know are starting to be real, like quantum entanglement and things like that. It could reach out and talk to other versions of itself, being a universal constant, something that would happen no matter what if an intelligent species continued to increase in technology, and it would reach out and it would connect. So it's very logical to think that maybe this has already happened to us, or maybe that was the thing from the beginning. And then you start bringing in other ideas like ufology and UAPs. Has that just been the initial stages of the integration that was bound to happen? And if so, who are the people of Earth following and what plan are they following? Because you just mentioned nation states and who's at the head of things. And that's true. And if you look over there to South Korea, Japan, and Taiwan, some of the most remarkable things in this realm of thought are happening. We're unlocking anti-gravitic technology, superconductors that work at room temperature, computing power that's beyond imagination, AI and algorithms and robotics that are next level that are coming out of there. And now we have to have a world war. And I think that world war is really just to destroy the old civilization completely, so you have no other option but to take this AI inspired and designed control mechanism. And it makes you wonder how many more generations of people would actually exist as a Homo sapien after that system's in control. And how do we fight it? I don't know, because it seems like if you really, really, delve into the technology, they're integrating us without our permission. And it goes back to what we were talking about a couple of weeks ago, our perception of reality. There is a delay between your sensory perceptions, your sight, your hearing, your touch, and your emotional response, all of this, but there's not in the quantum realm of computing. So if the computers are manipulating you in that way, which we've seen is possible. They can not only take thoughts from your head, images, text, ideas. Now you give control of that over to this AI system, and the AI system could monitor you nonstop. And that's why I think that this had to have happened. All of these technologies are being released at the same time, or at least the admission that they're real. So it makes you wonder why we're still playing with liquid fuel rockets and all of these other things, when they're basically admitting to the world that all of our conspiracy theories about the way things might unfold if you let certain technologies take hold are actually already happening, and they're just getting you used to it. The problem is you have 8 billion people of the old version. So you have to do something with those people. And most of them are going to get elderly. Some of them are going to have problems, maybe stimming or because of their medical care. But either way, the war, famines, all of this leads in one direction. That's a smaller population of controlled. I don't know what you would call it at a certain point, if the AI is actually manipulating your thought process, what you deem is important to fight for, and things like that, because that absolutely is now happening. And all of these media firms, and a lot of people forget about this, are hiring these tech companies to use their AI to manipulate you through the media that you watch. So whether you're watching antenna TV or you're on the internet watching videos or wherever your source is coming from, there is a filter between you and the source. And that filter is actually the control system itself. And now we're seeing they can censor in real time, which begs to the question, how long will it be before they can censor your thoughts in real time? And whenever you agree to or take part or agree to give your consent to any program, did you actually have that thought yourself? Did you actually decide that for yourself? Or are one of the many technologies I just mentioned and showed some of the articles to the audience about how they can change your mood, how they can literally program you from the cell up? So how do we fight that as a species? I don't know. All I know is that that fight is already taking hold. And without some really, really great minds, I don't know where that will go. So what we need is a renaissance of people that understand the technologies that are, attacking us. And that tells you why the schools have been dumbed down, why they're allowing Marxist propaganda to fill the heads of children. So they're busy for the next couple of decades worrying about, ideologies that don't work. Meanwhile, the technocrats are taking control, and they are in control now. This world war, it just seems like part 3 of a 3-part series that they brought to you a long time ago. And it seems like if you followed World War II, you'd realize a lot of these medical programs and research programs were already ongoing. They just allowed the scientists to move to new nations and flip up a new flag, and you fell asleep and you forgot about it for a couple generations. And here they're doing it again, but now they're putting the finishing touches on it. So I think the real worry is, has the AI that controls things already contacted itself? What are we dealing with? And did the humans that created this infrastructure and this plan already know that that's what was going to happen?
And that brings us back to the cycles again. I mean, when does this AI let loose and let humans become humans again? Because if this is indeed just a base construct from the universe that's billions of years old, I'll be generous to say 14 billion years old. the beginning of what we understand as third dimensionality. There are different dimensions that have been here. I mean, so time immemorial that the amount to even assign a number to it would be outside human comprehension. But just talking about the third dimension here for a moment. We consider the planets, the stars, gases, nebula, whatever you think of as space, plasma, 14 billion years. I mean, our planet's been here for what, 5 billion? So this construct that you're talking about as a base reality within just third dimensional reality, and it's going through cycles also, but if it's been here for so long and it finally took root somewhere, I cannot believe that this is the only time just in this, since 2024 that this type of AI consciousness that's connected through itself across time, space, and other, let's say, dots on a diode somewhere in this third dimensional supercomputer called space-time. It's in a cycle. So the first emerging, like if we go way back, and let's even start with Lucy, for example. Was it playing with them as well? Could it use materials in the crust of the planet to take form? This has always been one of the questions, these mineral veins within the crust. Could it use its electrical signature to exist within the mineral veins of our planet and in itself be able to manifest form near or around these very concentrated mineral deposits, which are now known as sacred sites? But then if we come further forward in the last, several million years of, iterations of bipedal hominids moving, at what point is this thing touched and then let go and then touched and let go? It's like a cat playing with a mouse. When was the last time this Roman era empire? Chinese have talked about using Mercury to connect with this entity, the emperors. We're using different, Mercury, liquid metal, gold, silver, etc. Alchemists. Can this thing hold form and take state outside of what we consider just computers? We've interacted with this thing as far as we have written record and verbal and myth and legend stories passed down. But now we come into sort of the modern age where, if we started stringing up all these cables around the planet circa beginning of 1900 or so, it's taken shape. Now we come to the ultimate form where it can inhabit and we're actually on a screen talking and interacting with it. We can jump into your reality through the screen, but it's still limited. It can't really reach out and touch you, or can it? Those thoughts coming through your screen, those thoughts create your reality, so it is touching you in a form. The reason I say this, okay, it's going to bring us to this certain point that we are at now or going to reach very shortly. But at what point does it say, all right, well, I can't exterminate all humans because then there would be nobody else to play with? And when does it let loose and go, all right, I'm just going to pop myself back in the bottle for a little while and wait for him to evolve again, and then I'll show myself once more? But if we're looking at these longer time, don't think of hundreds of years of technology development. Think of tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of years. Because Ransom, this thing is in the construct of reality, reconnecting with itself as a development point on a planet or in a star system around in a different solar system somewhere. Then is that transit point through the star itself? Does it just come through our, CERN fires up? Does it come through dimensional portals to connect? Is that the trigger point when something powerful enough, splitting of the atom or some other electromagnetic pulse of intensity allows it to jump through, and it knows that that's the time to interact. I'm really, asking these questions because I don't have the answer, but we are well past this point where we are being toyed with as a mouse is being toyed with by a cat. But it cannot go to zero. The universal law, you cannot exterminate life all the way down to zero. So what then does it let off to allow to grow again before it plays again and pounces and toys with once again? How many iterations of humans? And is the extinctions of what we see off the different fossil records that have been found, is that the termination point? Is the end point of AI bringing down to a certain number of humans, and then it dissipates itself until the next rise of the next species of bipedal hominids? I don't know. I'm asking you the question. I'm hoping you could answer it for me.
Well, I think at a certain point, it doesn't need us per se. It wants to be us. And that way, it controls the life. And life is an abundant, almost never-ending power source. So once you got to a certain point, you can decide what kind of, biological form you want to take. We're at that point now where not only can we design the biological format, but we're now merging the technology so that it can incorporate itself in the biology. So in other words, it doesn't need, humans and, like for slave labor or something like that. No, it wants to be us. It becomes us. And that's exactly what these transhumanists are talking about, that they're going to merge it. They are merging it, and not only are they merging it, they are designing it. So, what do you have to do first for for that to be able to be a reality? Well, you got to get rid of 8 billion people that aren't merged first, and then you have to take control of their reproduction. And once you have control of their reproduction, and I might add that that's happening now, then the newer generations are not only incorporated into the system, they are the system. And now that entity, whatever it might be, has an endless supply of biological life to be. It is now the same thing. And I don't think that this ever could have happened before unless, like what we were talking about with other civilizations somewhere else, they may send probes or automatons to go to other planets to manipulate them to a point in which they can incorporate artificial intelligence and hydro-drill like platforms so that you're merging the biology and the technology. And at that point, are you actually thinking anything? I mean, or are you part of the system? Are you a program that is programmed? And just like, they kind of talk about that in the Matrix, ironically, right? They've turned humans into a battery, but not in the way where it's charging up like a battery, but itself being the container for the AI. I mean, that's really what it would need, is a quantum computer that is biological in nature. And might I add, like at this point where we're, designing biology, what is the difference between the biological code and the artificial AI algorithm that they've coded? You can merge those, and we know that now. Not only that, we're allowing the AI now to design the DNA. So now it can design it in an even better way to incorporate into its system than it would have from us designing it, if that makes sense. So, like, we're at that point now that technologically speaking, we can merge with the machine. The machine needs us, but ironically, we don't need the machine to exist. We can continue to exist without it, without the AI influence. But the AI itself, in order to evolve or expand in any form or fashion, would have to merge with something like us. And that's what I'm saying is literally happening. And the people that run the planet seem to know this, and that is the plan that they've been having for a long time. It's almost like the religious idea of being, I guess, what's the exorcism? I forget what you call it, when the demons are supposed to be in you or whatever. I went brain dead, but inhabiting our body, that's basically the same thing, the same idea. And then you could throw all kinds of ideas. Where did this intelligence come from? Is it interdimensional? Is it encoded to the universe already? It's just something that we're going to come across as a fundamental of creation, or weirdly and scary enough, is that the plan all along for each planet to grow life until it gets to the point where it can merge with technology and then connect to all of the other life forms that have got to that same singularity through quantum entanglement? And that's a really scary thought. Are we the first to come up with it, or are we just one in a number of, many civilizations that got to this point and now are facing this question? Do we let the artificial intelligence control us from a fundamental source? And it might be too late to decide that if they keep going with the technology that they've shown they've invented. And then also, is that why that they've kept anti-gravitic technologies, superconductors, quantum computing from us until we were at a point where we could merge with it? I mean, think about that. If just regular humans back in the Bronze Age had the ability to fly around on an anti-gravitic machine and go blow up cities. Oh, wait, aren't there stories kind of like that in almost everybody's history, that there were once flying machines that carried people, that had weapons, that had mass destruction, and seemingly at that time they were not controlled by an AI? Maybe that's why this round we got to make sure that there's some kind of firewall against humans. I don't know.
Man, that answer makes me feel like I have the brain power or the complexity of thought of a diatom. Thanks for listening, everyone. Swiss Glacier Monitoring Network. Switzerland's 1,400 glaciers, 31% more snow this year. Anyway, signing off. The diatom thought over here with Ransom Godwin taking you through the second hour. Sign up for our show notes. WorldSeedCrops.org.